So what is genetic engineering? Genetic engineering, also known as genetic modification, or as you may see in your exam, GE or GM. And what this entails is modifying the actual gene of an organism or the genome by adding a gene from another organism to give it a certain or a desired characteristic. Now here are some different examples of organisms that have been modified or engineered over the years. And the reason why these have been done are to give them certain characteristics such as making them look healthier, disease resistant, glow in the dark, and so on. There are many different examples. One common example that comes up on exam questions is golden rice. This has been genetically engineered because it is yellow in colour, because it has added beta carotene, and it also has extra vitamin A, which helps people with eyesight problems. The gene for vitamin A is also found in daffodils, therefore it is extracted from the daffodils. For your exam, you will be required to know the process for genetic engineering. Now this is normally an extended question, therefore the process is as follows. First of all, you would isolate the required gene. In this case, we will isolate the glow-in-the-dark gene from the jellyfish. Secondly, we would cut the gene out using enzymes. Thirdly, we use a vector, usually a bacterial plasmid or a virus, to insert the gene into the required cells. And last but not least, the genes are transferred to the cells of the animals. In this case, we would transfer the glow-in-the-dark gene into the fish because we would like the fish to have the glow-in-the-dark characteristic, or even in plants or microbes at a very early stage of their development. Now you may be given different examples of explaining or being asked to explain what is the process of genetic engineering in this certain animal if we want it to have this desired feature. All you do is follow the same process, but obviously refer to the animal and the feature. Now that we've looked at what are genetically modified or genetically engineered organisms, and we've also looked at the process, we need to move on to the advantages and disadvantages. Starting off with the advantages, it's because production of disease resistant crops. What we mean by that is we end up with crops which don't have the disease, which equally means lots of crops. Secondly, we can use production of herbicide resistant crops. That means the herbicides kill the weeds, more likely for crops to survive. Therefore, there's going to be less competition between the weeds and the actual crops, resulting in a greater yield. And lastly, it's an example that we've already looked at, for example, the golden rice. And the reason why is obviously it contains vitamin A, which is good for eyesight problems. Now moving on to the disadvantages. One of them is cross-pollination could transfer genes into weeds. Weeds have the same advantage as crops, which means that they will start competing with the crops. Therefore, there'll be less space for the crops to grow and more space for the weeds to grow, which means that we end up with a smaller amount of crops. Secondly, it's because we have a lack of genetic variation. Now, if we look at this diagram here, if we genetically modify a particular potato, and we start growing just them. If, for example, there is a potato with a blight, it means that all the potatoes will get destroyed, therefore resulting in no crops. It also disrupts food chains, which means weeds are part of food chains, giving crops the advantage favour of one species over another. And lastly, some people think that genetically modified food needs more testing because they're unsure about the effects on human health. Now that we know what genetically modified organisms is and we know the process alongside the advantages and disadvantages, here is a typical 6-mark exam question on how human insulin is produced. Normally you are given a question alongside a diagram. What I have done in this case is I have put the sentences, and all you need to do is follow the same process as you've already seen on the PowerPoint, but adding the missing words to achieve the 6 marks.